This episode of Overlooked History of Georgia is about the Yazoo Land Fraud, a major scandal of early Georgia history. According to the colony of Georgia's charter, which was made in 1733, the colony's southern border was the Altamaha River, the northern border was the Savannah River, the eastern border was the Atlantic Ocean, and the western boundary was the Pacific Ocean. Back in 1686, the French had already claimed the land west of the Mississippi River, so Georgia's boundary effectively only reached the river. In 1763, Georgia's southern boundary was extended south to the mouth of the St. Mary's River, today the border between Georgia and Florida. In 1783, after the American Revolution, the western border was officially set to the Mississippi River. Due to various treaties with Native American tribes, only land near the Atlantic coast and lands near Augusta were settled. As early as 1789, land speculating companies were formed to try to buy land in western parts of the state of Georgia. 4 major companies were formed: the Upper Mississippi Company, the Tennessee Company, the Georgia Company, and the Georgia-Mississippi Company. A majority of the land in the areas these companies were hoping to settle was home to the Yazoo River, which flows into the Mississippi River at what is now Vicksburg. Known as the Yazooists, men from these companies attempted several times to get the state to sell them the land. In 1794, Yazooist leader James Gunn bribed many state officials in an effort to purchase the land. In 1795, under Governor George Matthews, an act was passed allowing the state of Georgia to sell the 4 companies 35 million acres at the price of 2 cents an acre. The 4 companies were happy to pay such a cheap price, and they resold much of the land to settlers. The 4 companies made massive profits on these sales. Georgians were not happy the state sold the land at such a low price, and some of the legislators who passed the act fled. The issue became the defining event of state politics. It became known as the Yazoo Land Scandal, the Yazoo Land Fraud, or the Yazoo Land Controversy. To help resolve the controversy, U.S. Senator James Jackson returned to Georgia. With his leadership, newly elected officials repealed the Yazoo Act. The 4 Yazoo companies were told to return the land, and were given their money back. Copies of the original act were burned in front of the state capitol building for all to see. While many Georgians were happy, some had already purchased land from the Yazoo companies and refused to give it back to the state. In part because of the controversy that surrounded the land, present-day Alabama and Mississippi was given to the U.S. government in 1802. The settlers who refused to give back their land eventually took their case, called Fletcher v. Peck, to the U.S. Supreme Court. The court ruled in favor of the settlers. The ruling is notable as it is the first time in U.S. history the Supreme Court decided a state law was unconstitutional. The Yazoo Land Scandal defined early Georgia politics, and was an incredibly divisive issue. We can now politely thank it for paving the way for Alabama and Mississippi. Thank you.
Georgia, 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 the whole day through. Just an old sweet song keeps Georgia on my mind. Georgia on my mind.